Hello there and welcome back to the Sleep Science channel, where we tuck you into bed not with lullabies but with existential rabbit holes so deep you might wake up wondering if your pillow is actually made of stardust. Tonight's journey is a simple one, at least on paper. You're going to float directly into the void, into what we casually call nothing. Picture yourself lying back, your room dim, the hum of your fan soft against the silence, and then, suddenly, the walls dissolve. Your bed drifts upward like a raft slipping into a river of black velvet. No stars yet, no galaxies, not even the twinkle of a single dust grain. Just a canvas so pure in its emptiness it feels louder than any sound. And here comes the cheeky reality check. You probably won't survive this in real life because space without protection is not kind to bare skin. But don't worry, in this story you're wrapped in something better than a spacesuit. You're wrapped in narration itself. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing who else is awake when the universe outside is supposed to be quiet. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice about drifting into nothing is that it still feels like something. Your eyes search for edges, but every direction is the same blackness. You reach your hand out, expecting resistance, but your fingers pass through a kind of invisible velvet. Emptiness itself becomes a texture, smooth, cold, and oddly thick. Silence settles on you like a blanket, yet your ears strain for sound, as if your brain refuses to believe it can all be this quiet. And then a thought creeps in. Perhaps nothing is more complicated than you expected. After all, when people once gazed at the night sky without telescopes, they thought the darkness between stars was literally void, an eternal nothingness. But here you are, learning the hard way that even nothing has flavour. You blink and remember that in ancient Greece, thinkers like Aristotle were deeply suspicious of the concept of void. He argued that nature abhors a vacuum, that there simply could not be empty space, because matter would instantly rush to fill it. To him, nothing was a contradiction in terms. You can almost picture him now, in flowing robes, wagging his finger at you across millennia, insisting that the darkness wrapping around you must be an illusion. Yet his student, Strato of Lampsacus, took a different angle, suggesting that vacuums might exist after all, squeezed between atoms. Historians still argue whether Strato truly believed in an infinite void, or if he was simply trying to save face in debates where Aristotle's authority loomed too large. Either way, their disagreement leaves you chuckling softly. Leave it to philosophers to fight over how much of nothing can exist. And speaking of nothing, it's surprising how it has always scared people. In the Middle Ages, scholars folded Aristotle's rejection of void neatly into theology. After all, if God created everything, what business would there be for a nothing lurking between the stars? For many centuries, even to imagine such emptiness was branded dangerous, a kind of heretical curiosity. You float deeper, thinking about monks illuminating manuscripts with gold ink, while outside the actual night sky stretched endlessly, brimming with more mystery than their candlelit halls could imagine. The cosmic joke here is that their fear of nothing kept them from realizing just how much something there really was out there. But you notice something else about drifting in this void. Your body starts to crave reference points. With no up, no down, and no horizon, you lose track of your own shape. Is your hand still raised? Is your bed still beneath you? For a moment, you feel like a chalk outline dissolving into air. It's almost like sensory deprivation tanks, the modern wellness fad where people float in warm salt water in pitch-dark silence. People say their brains begin filling the nothingness with visions, memories, or even whole imaginary conversations. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Early astronauts reported similar things. One even claimed he could hear phantom music while alone in orbit, as if his brain decided silence was unacceptable. The nothing around you suddenly vibrates with possibility. It's not a flat, boring absence. It's a stage, waiting for imagination to project meaning. You begin to wonder if perhaps this is why humans struggle so much with the idea of nothing. Your brain simply refuses to accept blankness. It craves pattern, story, interruption. Maybe that's why when we stare at clouds, we see faces. When we squint into static, we swear it looks like snowflakes. Even the most faithful void gets filled by the stubborn theatre of the human mind. As you continue to drift, you notice how your breathing becomes the only reliable sound. In, out, like a metronome marking time in a place where time doesn't seem to exist. You wonder if this is what astronauts felt on their first spacewalks, the sheer terror of having only their breath tethering them to life. You smile at the irony. In movies, space is always a battlefield of explosions, but in reality, it is much scarier in its silence. The explosions would at least give you something to hear to orient yourself. The real void just leaves you hanging with your thoughts, and those thoughts are a little mischievous tonight. You picture what it would be like if your neighbour's cat suddenly floated by, batting lazily at invisible atoms. You chuckle. It's not impossible to imagine, since Schrödinger's cat has been stuck inside a box for decades anyway. Might as well let it stretch its paws in the cosmic void. This silly image reminds you that jokes are a good survival mechanism in emptiness. After all, nothing plus humour still equals something. You let your mind drift back to the main question. What is nothing? Right now, nothing feels like a character in your story, as alive and shifting as any landscape. The blackness around you pulses not with absence but with mystery, reminding you that human beings are always in a kind of dance with the unknown. The void isn't an enemy to escape, it's a stage for curiosity. And as you settle deeper into it, you realise that tonight you're not just learning facts, you're rehearsing how to be comfortable with absence itself. The void does not answer your questions, it only asks them back. Yet somehow, that feels enough for now. You keep floating in the black, but the emptiness begins to ripple with stories of how humans first tried to make sense of it. You picture yourself drifting backward in time through layers of history stacked like transparent pages, each civilization scribbling its ideas about what nothing might be. The further you sink, the more voices you hear. Ancient philosophers muttering about voids, priests whispering warnings about chaos, and mathematicians scratching numbers in sand. The truth is, long before telescopes and particle colliders, people were already obsessed with the question of emptiness, and they weren't gentle about it. To them, nothing wasn't just a thought experiment, it was a threat to the order of the universe. Take the Greeks, for example. Aristotle looms large again, lecturing beneath colonnades while his students scribble furiously on wax tablets. He tells them that nature abhors a vacuum, and the students nod because honestly, who wants to argue with a man in sandals who sounds so certain? For Aristotle, motion itself required a medium like air or water to carry things along. Without it, the whole world would collapse into nonsense. He thought even imagining a void was dangerous, like trying to draw a circle with no circumference. And so his idea dominated Western thought for centuries, spreading like cosmic gossip. You smile to yourself, realizing that Aristotle basically convinced everyone that nothing doesn't exist simply because it offended his sense of logic. Bold move. But not all ancient thinkers were on board. Democritus, the cheerful atomist, imagined the universe as little specks of matter bouncing around inside infinite emptiness. To him, atoms needed a void to move in, otherwise they'd just clump together like socks after laundry day. The quirky bit is that he described this void as the no-thing, that allowed the something to exist. It's almost poetic, like a philosopher's version of a breakup text. It's not you, it's the nothing between us. Historians still argue whether Democritus's atoms were meant to be literal building blocks or just a metaphor for change. Either way, his ideas were considered fringe, and his void was treated with suspicion. The Romans inherited the Greek obsession with nothing, and their language gave us a clue to how confusing it all was. The Latin word vacuum literally means empty, but in practice, Romans filled that word with superstition. To them, empty space felt unnatural, a crack in the cosmic wall through which chaos could pour. Some even linked voids with underworld imagery, nothingness as a doorway to death itself. You drift in your cosmic raft, picturing toga-clad senators wringing their hands about philosophical gaps, while actual Roman aqueducts hummed with rushing water that definitely left no room for emptiness. The irony makes you grin. They feared voids, but they built plumbing systems that relied on air gaps to work. As time slides forward, you drift toward the Middle Ages. Here, the debate over nothing took on a fiery religious tone. Christian theologians argued that God created the universe ex nihilo, out of nothing. But here's the catch. They insisted that the nothing in this phrase wasn't really a thing at all. It was just a placeholder, a way of saying the world sprang from God's will alone. If you push the question further, asking, but what is this nothing really? you risked being accused of heresy. Imagine monks copying manuscripts, pausing to glare suspiciously at the word void in the margins. Some of them probably thought that contemplating emptiness too deeply was like peeking behind God's curtain, and nobody wanted that smoke in the Middle Ages. A quirky little side note sneaks in here. In medieval art, you can sometimes spot small, dark gaps painted between heavenly scenes, representing the uncreated zones of reality. They're like cosmic negative spaces, little hints that even while denying the void, artists couldn't resist doodling it in. Historians still argue whether these dark patches were symbolic, aesthetic, or the sneaky work of apprentices who got bored gilding angels' wings. Either way, it shows that the void haunted imaginations even when it was officially outlawed. And yet, despite centuries of resistance, the void refused to vanish. You drift along through Renaissance Italy, where scholars dared to dust off Democritus's atomism. Thinkers like Giordano Bruno spoke passionately about infinite worlds floating in an endless cosmic sea, and for that he earned a one-way ticket to the stake. You shiver slightly at the thought. His crime wasn't just believing in other worlds, but daring to imagine that the void was vast enough to hold them. And here you are, centuries later, bobbing comfortably in the same infinite nothing he died for. The universe has a dark sense of humour. Your mind drifts back to sensory impressions. The nothing you're floating in feels eerily heavy, almost like water pressing against your skin. You wonder if this is how those early thinkers felt when they closed their eyes and tried to imagine infinity. Maybe it's not fear of emptiness itself that unsettled them, but the fact that nothing always seems to swell into too much. Try to picture a void and suddenly you're picturing endless horizons. Dark seas, silent skies, never just nothing. The human brain can't hold pure absence. It always sneaks in images to soften the blow. That's probably why people fought over it so fiercely. Nothing wasn't empty to them at all. It was full of anxieties, metaphors, and forbidden possibilities. You can't resist a wry smile. If nothing else, you realise humans are terrible at handling nothing. Some of us deny it, some of us worship it, some of us set people on fire over it. But in every age, the void has been less about what's really out there and more about what we can or can't stand to imagine. That's the hidden joke of drifting here in the dark. The void is a mirror, and what you see inside it is always yourself. The blackness around you grows deeper, but instead of fear, you feel a strange comfort. It's not hostile, not empty in the way people once feared. It's just waiting, patient and infinite, as if it's been here all along, shrugging while civilizations rise and fall, arguing endlessly about what it is. For tonight, you decide not to argue. You simply float, letting the ancient voices fade into silence and prepare to slip into the next layer of the story. The silence of the void holds you steady as time pushes forward again. You drift past the long shadows of medieval cathedrals, past monks who scribble warnings about emptiness, until you land softly in a chamber glowing with candlelight. Here, in the early 1600s, a new kind of curiosity has begun to bubble. This is no philosopher's void now, it's a scientist's puzzle. Imagine standing in the workshop of Evangelista Torricelli, the Italian physicist who dared to trap emptiness in a glass tube. He pours mercury into a slender cylinder, flips it upside down and watches in wonder as a pocket of nothing forms at the top. You hover nearby, peering over his shoulder, marvelling at how something as simple as a puddle of silver liquid can reveal such unsettling truths. That pocket of void will eventually become famous as the first sustained vacuum on Earth. Not exactly cosmic nothingness, but a small shimmering step in that direction. The funny thing is, people didn't celebrate this breakthrough with confetti. They were nervous, even horrified. Remember Aristotle's old rule about nature abhorring a vacuum? Well, that superstition ran so deep that even 1600 scholars felt uneasy watching empty space appear in a bottle. Some insisted invisible matter must still be lurking there, too fine for human senses to detect. Others said Torricelli had basically opened a dangerous hole in reality, like leaving your front door unlocked, but for chaos. Historians still argue whether this resistance was more about philosophy or fear, but either way, the poor mercury tube became a symbol of scandal as much as discovery. Of course, Torricelli wasn't working alone. You float across the Channel to England, where Robert Boyle and his assistant Robert Hooke wrestle with a device that looks like a medieval torture machine but is actually an air pump. With sweaty brows and stubborn determination, they crank handles, twist valves, and finally, at great effort, suck air out of the chamber. You lean closer as they slide a small bird inside, close the glass dome, and begin the grim demonstration. The poor bird flaps for a moment, then falls still. Hook scribbles notes while Boyle announces triumphantly, "Air isn't just invisible fluff. It's necessary for life itself." You exhale softly, grateful this story is only a thought experiment here in the void, because real demonstrations like that were far less gentle. Still, the experiments mesmerized audiences. People crowded into lecture halls just to see what would happen when candles were placed under glass or bells rung in a vacuum. A candle snuffed itself out, a bell fell silent, and suddenly the invisible world of air was exposed as a powerful something rather than a nothing. This was shocking to 17th century minds. They thought space between objects was empty, but now it became clear that the atmosphere was a tangible blanket around the Earth. Without it, no flame, no sound, no life. The void, it seemed, was not only real, but deadly. You chuckle quietly to yourself, because even as you float here in cosmic nothing, you realise that this era of history was like the unboxing video of the vacuum. Picture Boyle as the original YouTuber. Today we're testing what happens when we remove all the air. Smash that like button if you enjoy suffocating chickens. It's dark humour, yes, but it shows how little humans once understood the silent stage they lived on. One quirky tidbit. Otto von Guericke, a German scientist, decided to show off his vacuum pump by creating two giant copper hemispheres, sealing them together and pumping out the air inside. Then he hitched them to teams of horses, 8 on each side. The horses strained and pulled, but they couldn't separate the spheres. The crowd gasped. Empty space, it turned out, was stronger than horsepower. This spectacle became known as the Magdeburg Hemispheres demonstration, and it made emptiness a public celebrity. Even kings and emperors came to watch. As you float deeper into your own personal vacuum tonight, you can almost hear the echoes of that crowd, gasping at the sight of horses defeated by nothing. It's strangely comforting, realizing how dramatic nothing can be when staged properly. And in a way, it makes sense. Our brains are drawn to paradoxes. Show us an absence that behaves like a presence, and we'll fill entire theatres to witness it. But these experiments also cracked open debates that still haven't fully settled. Was the space inside those tubes truly empty, or just filled with subtle matter humans couldn't yet measure? Historians still argue whether Boyle himself believed in true voids, or whether he simply saw them as temporary gaps in air pressure. The void remained slippery, elusive, never quite willing to sit still in a jar. You stretch out your arm into the darkness, imagining it as one of Boyle's glass chambers. Is this the same kind of emptiness? Or is the void you're drifting in more profound, stretching beyond simple airlessness into something fundamental about reality? It's hard to say, but in this moment you can almost feel the presence of those early scientists beside you, Torricelli, Boyle, Guericke, all craning their necks upward at the night sky, wondering if the vast darkness between stars was the same kind of emptiness they coaxed into glass bottles. You pause to appreciate the irony. While kings, priests, and philosophers argued in palaces and churches about whether voids existed, a handful of stubborn experimenters simply built machines and proved it. That shift from debating to demonstrating was as monumental as the void itself. Humanity stopped fearing emptiness as a theological threat and began poking it, testing it, turning it into a laboratory subject. The void went from nightmare to experiment, from forbidden thought to scientific curiosity. The nothing surrounding you feels different now, less abstract, more mechanical, as though invisible pistons are at work, pumping and releasing, shaping the silence around you. You picture all those mercury tubes, air pumps and hemispheres, and realize they were humanity's first keys to unlock the universe's silence. Each one a little clumsy, a little theatrical, but still, each one a step toward the cosmic vastness you're floating in now. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the void cradle you. It no longer feels empty, but full of echoes, ancient debates, horse hoof clatter, the hiss of air sucked from chambers. Nothing is beginning to reveal its history, layer by layer, like an onion of absence. And somehow peeling it back makes the blackness more comforting rather than less. You're still drifting, though the blackness around you is no longer the quiet emptiness of philosophers or the glass bottle void of Boyle and Torricelli. Now the darkness flickers, tiny sparks, too faint for the eye but somehow felt at the edges of your awareness crackle in and out of being. One moment, absolute silence. The next, a whisper of light, a ghostly particle shimmering before vanishing again. You're beginning to realize that even in the deepest nothing, the universe refuses to keep still. Welcome to quantum jitters, the restless undercurrent of the void. In the 20th century, physicists discovered something profoundly unsettling. What you think of as empty space isn't empty at all. Instead, it boils with invisible activity. According to quantum field theory, every point in space is filled with fluctuating energy fields. Particles can blink into existence and vanish almost immediately, like mischievous fireflies. These are called virtual particles, and they exist long enough to influence reality before dissolving back into the nothing they came from. You lean into the void, half expecting one of them to brush against your arm, like static electricity from a sweater. It's not just imagination. These fleeting phantoms have measurable effects. For example, two uncharged metal plates placed close together will actually feel a tiny push from the vacuum itself. This is known as the Casimir effect, and it proves that emptiness can generate pressure. You smile wryly, even nothing gets pushy sometimes. Historians still argue whether these fluctuations should be thought of as real particles or simply mathematical conveniences. After all, if something vanishes faster than you can measure, does it really exist? Or is it just a ghost scribbled into the equations to make them balance? The quirky part is, physicists discovered that vacuum fluctuations can influence cosmic scale phenomena. Hawking radiation, the faint glow predicted to leak from black holes, arises from this jittery background. Imagine pairs of particles constantly popping into existence near a black hole's edge. Usually, they cancel each other out, disappearing together. But near that monstrous gravity, one particle can fall in while the other escapes, leaving behind a faint trickle of energy, as though the black hole is slowly evaporating. You chuckle softly. Even the darkest monsters in the cosmos can't resist a little quantum itch. Your senses adjust to this quantum foam around you. The void no longer feels smooth and velvet as it did earlier, but restless, like soda fizzing in slow motion. You realize that nothing is never truly nothing. It is more like a stage buzzing with actors waiting for their cue. Every atom in your body owes its existence to these fluctuations, because without them, forces like electromagnetism would behave differently. The whole cosmos, in a way, is balanced on the shivering shoulders of quantum nothingness. To put it in perspective, physicists once calculated the energy density of empty space based on these quantum jitters. The result was so absurdly large, 20 orders of magnitude bigger than observed reality, that it became infamous as the worst theoretical prediction in the history of physics. You grin at the irony. When scientists try to measure nothing, they end up drowning in far too much something. It's like checking your bank balance and discovering not $0, but infinite negative dollars, an overdraft so huge your grandchildren would still be paying it off. You drift further, wondering what it would feel like to fall into a quantum void without the comfort of narration. Would the flickering particles sting like sparks on your skin? Or would they pass through you like ghosts? Nobody really knows. Experiments can confirm the indirect effects of vacuum energy, but not the full experience. This uncertainty has led to some of the most heated debates in physics. Historians still argue whether the vacuum should be thought of as an actual sea of activity or simply as potentiality, a canvas where probability splashes temporary shapes before wiping them away. The mystery deepens when you think about the role of nothing in cosmic expansion. Cosmologists propose that vacuum energy may drive the universe's acceleration, stretching galaxies apart faster and faster. If true, then the flickers you sense right now aren't just local static, they're the engine of the cosmos itself. That means emptiness isn't passive at all, it's bossy, pushing galaxies away from each other like a grumpy neighbour insisting on personal space. Nothing, it seems, can be rather dramatic. You pause to appreciate how bizarre this all is. Earlier you floated through Aristotle's denial of void, then Torricelli's trapped bubbles of emptiness, and Boyle's mechanical chambers. Now you're here, immersed in a version of nothing that is busier than Times Square on New Year's Eve. What looked like an absence is actually an infinite playground of possibility. You tilt your head as if listening for the fizz of quantum foam. Maybe it's your imagination, but you swear the silence is humming ever so faintly. Your mind wanders towards stranger implications. Some physicists propose that entire universes could bud off from these fluctuations, If the right kind of bubble appears in the void, expanding rapidly, it might inflate into a cosmos of its own. In this view, our universe could itself be a quantum hiccup, a momentary ripple that got carried away and never stopped expanding. The thought makes you laugh softly. Imagine being the cosmic equivalent of a soap bubble that never popped. Humbling, isn't it? Yet despite the strange fireworks of quantum fields, you feel oddly calm here. The flickers don't threaten you. Instead, they feel like gentle fireflies in the night, reminding you that emptiness is never as empty as it looks. Nothing is restless, creative, full of possibility. And as you float deeper into this jittery darkness, you realize you're not just learning about science, you're learning how to relax into uncertainty, how to befriend the void even when it refuses to sit still. The black sea around you has stopped flickering for a moment, or maybe you've just adjusted to the quantum fizz. Either way, the silence stretches wide, so wide that you almost believe it's truly empty, till a scent drifts past you, faint but undeniable. Metallic, sharp, a little like a hot radiator or the tang of a freshly welded pipe. You blink, confused. How can a void smell? Then you remember, astronauts have reported this exact thing. When they come back from spacewalks and crack open the airlock, their suits release an odour that clings stubbornly, like burnt steak or ozone. In the emptiness between stars, couriers, where no air should carry aroma, nothing somehow leaves a trace on their skin and gear. Nothing, it seems, has a smell. It's not that they're sniffing space directly. You can't breathe a vacuum without losing more than just your sense of smell. Instead, scientists think the metallic scent comes from atomic oxygen, a highly reactive form of the element created by ultraviolet radiation slamming into molecules high above Earth's atmosphere. When astronauts return inside, those excited atoms cling to their suits and react with the materials, producing an odour. It's as though the void leaves fingerprints. You smile at the strangeness of it. Imagine floating in emptiness, coming back and carrying a souvenir on your clothes, the perfume of nothing. Of course, space isn't entirely scentless anywhere you go. You've heard that the centre of our galaxy might actually smell faintly like raspberries and rum. Astronomers detected ethyl formate, the chemical responsible for those aromas, in the Sagittarius B2 molecular cloud. That's right, the same void that swallows starlight also brews up interstellar cocktails. It's a quirky reminder that nothingness isn't uniform. In one direction it bites with metal, in another it tickles with fruit. You let out a soft laugh. The universe is basically the weirdest perfumery ever. Back on Earth, we have a complicated relationship with scentless voids. Think of hospital operating rooms scrubbed to the point of sterility, or modern clean rooms where microchips are built in filtered air. To us, nothing in the air feels safe, controlled, clinical, but in space that same absence is eerie, dangerous. You're drifting in it now, and you can't quite decide if the silence around your nose is soothing or sinister. Maybe both. Historians still argue whether ancient people had similar associations with smell and void. Some suggest that myths describing stale air or airless realms were early attempts to describe suffocating emptiness. Others believe those tales were symbolic, meant to evoke spiritual dread rather than physics. Either way, it shows how deeply humans connect emptiness with the absence of scent, the loss of familiar atmosphere. Nothing for us often begins with the nose. You shift in your drifting bed, inhaling deeply, as though you might catch a trace of the astronaut's metallic tang. For a moment, you swear it's there, an imaginary echo curling into your nostrils. The association is so strong that your brain fills in the blank. That's the strange trick of nothing. Give it a frame and it paints itself. Just as your eyes see flickers in the dark, your nose invents phantom smells. In sensory deprivation chambers on Earth, people often report the same thing. After floating long enough in scentless, featureless air, their brains conjure aromas, bread baking, flowers blooming, smoke curling. The void refuses to stay void. There's a quiet humour in this. Imagine the first astronaut describing the smell of space as like seared steak, and everyone at NASA nodding, trying to hide their hunger. Or the fact that when scientists bottled vacuum chamber residue for testing, the samples stubbornly refused to reveal anything clear-cut. You almost picture some cosmic prankster sprinkling hints of odour into the void, just enough to confuse us. But beneath the humour lies something profound. Smell is tied closely to memory, to comfort, to identity. When nothing carries a scent, it means even the void can trigger recognition. The metallic tang links astronauts back to welding shops or machinery rooms on Earth. The raspberry and rum cloud makes astronomers grin with a taste of familiarity in the heart of the galaxy. Nothing reminds us of something. That's how the human mind makes sense of it, by tethering absence to presence. You drift a little deeper into the black, letting your imagination play. What would the void around distant galaxies smell like? Would it carry a trace of frozen hydrogen, sharp and bitter, or perhaps the sweetness of methane? You know you'll never really breathe it, but the thought comforts you anyway. It's proof that emptiness is never quite empty, that even in Baumeister, the senses find a way to fill the gaps. A playful thought sneaks in. Maybe the universe's final act, at the heat death trillions of years from now, will be a single whiff of scent, drifting across the dark, a farewell fragrance of all that once existed. Nothing's perfume, the last reminder that emptiness was never truly alone. As you exhale slowly, you feel calmer. The void doesn't feel sterile anymore. It feels like a space that holds stories, even aromas, waiting to be noticed. You lie back in the drifting dark, letting the silence wrap around you like a subtle fragrance, soothing in its strangeness. Nothing, you realize, is not about loss. It's about subtlety. And tonight, subtlety is enough to lull you further into the dream of the cosmos. The silence is thicker now, not just dark, but weighted with expectation, as though the void itself leans closer to hear you breathe. You pause, waiting for some echo, but nothing answers. That's when you remember the other strangeness of space. It has no sound. Your ears twitch in the quiet, straining for even the faintest hum, but the emptiness gives nothing back. You know the reason, of course. Sound is vibration travelling through air or water, and here there's no medium, no molecules to carry a wave. A dropped wrench would clatter noiselessly, an explosion would bloom in perfect silence, and your voice would die in your throat without a trace. You chuckle softly, imagining Hollywood directors wincing decades of pew-pew laser battles ruined by the universe's absolute refusal to provide background music. But the silence isn't complete, not if you're clever. Space itself is quiet, yes, but astronauts still hear through their bones and helmets, vibrations travelling through solid material instead of empty air. Buzz Aldrin once said he could hear the whirring pumps of his spacesuit as clearly as if they were right beside his ear, because the sound carried through the rigid frame. Even in nothing, the body finds a way to cheat. A quirky tidbit bubbles up here. During one Apollo mission, an astronaut reported hearing a tip flute, not an alien concert, but the vibration of an instrument panel amplified through the cabin. The void doesn't stop everything, it just reroutes the music. Historians still argue whether silence itself frightened the earliest stargazers, or whether they simply never thought about it. After all, from Earth, the heavens are anything but silent. Frogs croak in the marshes, winds howl, fires crackle, and beneath it all, the pulse of human conversation fills the night. To imagine a sky where none of that sound could travel may have been beyond their reach. You tilt your head back, staring into the void, and try to imagine explaining to Aristotle that the stars make no noise, no matter how brightly they blaze. He'd probably scoff, then accuse you of breaking logic again. What fascinates scientists today is that silence can still be heard in other ways. Radio telescopes pick up electromagnetic waves from distant galaxies, translating them into data that we sometimes process as sound. The universe, in a sense, hums through frequencies we can't normally detect. There's even the famous space roar, an unexplained radio signal discovered in 2006 that's 6 times louder than expected. Nobody knows where it comes from. Dark matter. Distant galaxies, or just the universe trolling us with static. You smile at the thought. Nothing doesn't always mean quiet. It just means you're listening wrong. The irony deepens when you think about the cosmic microwave background. That faint hiss, left over from the Big Bang, is technically everywhere. Old television static, the snowy fuzz when antennas failed to catch a channel, included fragments of that ancient echo. Entire generations unknowingly tuned into the sound of the early universe whenever their sets went fuzzy. Picture it, kids smacking the side of boxy TVs, annoyed at nothing, when in reality they were brushing against the first afterglow of everything. You can't help but grin at that cosmic prank. And yet, despite these hidden hums, the silence of the void remains overwhelming. You close your eyes and imagine yourself floating without narration, your breath gone, your heartbeat too faint to notice. No wind, no rustle, no footsteps, just stillness so pure it presses into your ears like cotton. Some people crave silence on Earth, chasing it in monasteries or soundproof rooms, but in truth, total silence unsettles us. In an anechoic chamber, the quietest room ever built, visitors often report hearing their own heartbeat, or even the blood rushing in their veins. Stay long enough and the mind begins to hallucinate. The void does something similar. It fills the absence with phantoms. You let the idea sink in that silence is never truly silent. There's always some faint vibration, some background hum, whether from your body, your hourière, or the cosmos itself. Nothing may not carry sound, but you do, and you bring your noises with you into the dark. Maybe that's why astronauts describe the silence as almost spiritual, a kind of holy pause between breaths. It forces them to listen to themselves more carefully than they ever have. The nothing around you feels different now. Instead of a terrifying absence, it's a vast mute stage waiting for your own sound. You imagine snapping your fingers, knowing no one would hear it, yet also knowing the gesture itself would matter. There's something freeing about it, like a comedian delivering a punchline into the void, grinning even though the laughter never comes. You whisper to yourself nonsense words, half-asleep ramblings, and though the void ignores you, you feel lighter for speaking anyway. And maybe that's the real secret. The silence of nothing isn't punishment, it's invitation. It invites you to fill it with your own thoughts, your own heartbeat, your own stories. As you float deeper into the black, your ears ringing faintly from the absence, you begin to feel at peace with the quiet. After all, silence isn't empty, it's just the softest sound of all. You drift further into the dark, lulled by silence, until the void suddenly shifts character. Ahead of you, the blackness seems to fold inward, collapsing into itself like fabric tugged down a drain. You realise with a shiver about you're approaching a black hole. This isn't emptiness anymore. This is gravity taken to its most theatrical extreme, a cosmic diva demanding the spotlight by swallowing everything around her. You float cautiously closer, knowing you're safe in this narrative bubble, but your skin prickles all the same. Nothing here is normal. A black hole forms when a massive star burns out and collapses under its own gravity. The core implodes, and the star's outer layers explode outward in a supernova. What remains is a singularity, a point so dense that not even light can escape. You peer into the warped halo surrounding it, the event horizon shimmering like the lip of a waterfall. Once you pass that line, there's no way back. Historians still argue whether the concept of singularity is a real physical entity or just a sign that our math has given up. Either way, you know you're staring at the very edge of what science can describe. But here's the strange part. Black holes are not truly holes at all. They're more like mountains of gravity, invisible and towering. Everything that falls in is crushed not into nothing but into a compressed state beyond comprehension. Astronomers can't directly see black holes, but they spot them by their effects. Stars whipping around invisible centers, gas clouds spiraling in, radiation screaming from the edge. You imagine yourself perched on a cosmic deck chair, sipping a coffee while watching matter whirlpool into oblivion. Not a bad seat if you ignore the whole infinite crushing bit. The quirky detail? Black holes aren't completely silent eaters. When matter falls toward them, it heats up and releases powerful X-rays, some of the brightest beacons in the sky. So in a twist of irony, the darkest objects in the universe are surrounded by blazing halos of light. Astronomers compare it to cosmic graffiti, black holes announcing their presence by scrawling neon warnings across the void. You chuckle softly. Nothing screams mysterious abyss quite like an object that lights up like a Vegas strip just before devouring you. Stephen Hawking added another strange layer in the 1970s. He proposed that black holes aren't entirely black. They slowly evaporate by releasing tiny amounts of radiation. This Hawking radiation comes from those jittery quantum particles you met earlier, the ones constantly popping in and out of nothing. Near the event horizon, one particle falls in while the other escapes, carrying away energy. Over unimaginable time spans, the black hole shrinks until eventually it vanishes. So even the hungriest void maker has an expiration date. You lean back in your drifting bed, oddly comforted that not even black holes get to last forever. Historians still argue whether Hawking's prediction will ever be proven. Black holes are so distant and their evaporation so slow that we may never detect it directly. Some physicists think new physics could overturn the whole idea, yet the image persists, a monster slowly hissing away into nothing, undone by the very emptiness it feeds on. It's hard not to admire the poetic justice. You find yourself staring into the warped light circling the event horizon, thinking about how reality bends here. If you fell toward it, time would stretch strangely. To a distant observer, you'd slow down, frozen at the edge forever. To you, though, the plunge would feel fast, ending in a blur. In other words, nothing at the border of a black hole agrees on how to tell time. You smirk. It's the ultimate scheduling nightmare. No wonder scientists bicker over the details. The void around you feels heavier now, as though gravity itself presses against your skin. Yet instead of fear, you feel awe. Black holes remind you that nothing is often just a disguise for extremes. They are emptiness taken so far it loops back into presence. They are absence with teeth, silence with gravity, void made visible by the way it bends light. Nothing here is passive, it roars by swallowing. You take a slow breath, letting the vision settle. For all their menace, black holes also feel like guardians of mystery. They stand at the edges of knowledge, reminding us that even with equations and telescopes, some answers remain hidden behind curtains of gravity. And maybe that's okay. After all, if nothing gave up all its secrets at once, what would we dream about on nights like they? So you drifted away from the black hole's pull, carrying with you the memory of its warped horizon. The silence feels different now, not empty, not smooth, but full of weight and curvature. Nothing, you realize, is never just nothing. Sometimes it's the most powerful something the universe can hide. You ease away from the crushing pull of the black hole, letting the warped horizon fade behind you. The void softens again, no longer heavy with gravity, but strangely warm, almost buzzing. At first, you think it's your imagination, a phantom echo after staring at that abyss. Then you notice it, an invisible glow, faint but everywhere, like the whisper of a candle that never goes out. This is the cosmic microwave background, the leftover radiation from the Big Bang itself. You drift inside it now, wrapped in the afterglow of the universe's birth, and realize that emptiness has been humming softly for nearly 14 billion years. The story begins in Reihe. About 380,000 years after the Big Bang, the universe cooled enough for atoms to form, releasing light that had been trapped in the hot plasma. That light stretched as the universe expanded, shifting into microwaves too faint for our eyes. But it never disappeared. Instead, it filled every corner of space with a uniform glow. You're bathing in it now, whether you notice or not. A gentle reminder that nothing is never entirely empty. There's always a memory smouldering in the dark. Historians still argue whether the discovery of the cosmic microwave background in the 1960s should be credited entirely to Penzias and Wilson, the two radio engineers who stumbled across it while testing an antenna in New Jersey, or whether George Gamow and his colleagues deserved more recognition for predicting it earlier. The debate doesn't matter much as you float here, though. What matters is that when Penzias and Wilson first detected the faint hiss, they thought it was pigeon droppings on their antenna. They scrubbed and polished, chased away the birds, and the noise remained. Only later did they realize they were hearing the echo of creation. You grin softly. Cosmic history announced itself not with trumpets, but with a stubborn static that outlasted pigeons. The quirky thing about this background is its uniformity. No matter where you look, the radiation is almost the same temperature, about 2.7 Kelvin above absolute zero. That's colder than liquid helium, yet just warm enough to prove the universe is filled with a faint heat. Imagine the entire cosmos as a gigantic refrigerator left humming for billions of years. Yet when scientists mapped this glow in detail, they found tiny ripples, subtle variations in temperature, that later grew into galaxies, stars, and planets. In other words, you're alive because the universe wasn't perfectly smooth. Nothing carried wrinkles, and those wrinkles blossomed into everything. You drift deeper, imagining yourself lying back as the microwave glow seeps gently into your skin. It's like soaking in an invisible hot spring, except the water is radiation from the dawn of time. You wonder what it would feel like to hear it directly, the way old televisions once did. Static fuzz, crackling softly in the background, reminding you that your existence is wired into the first light of the universe. Not bad for a bedtime soundtrack. There's an irony here worth savouring. Early philosophers, remember, argued that void was terrifying because it seemed like a blank slate. Yet here you are, discovering that the blankest slate of all, the darkness between galaxies, carries an ancient scribble. Nothing is not blank, it remembers. Every photon of this radiation has been travelling for nearly 14 billion years, longer than any civilization, longer than any planet has existed. You imagine catching one in your hand like a firefly and whispering, "So, where have you been?" The answer would be a story older than language. Some scientists now use the cosmic microwave background as a kind of map. By studying its ripples, they reconstruct the early universe's structure, like archaeologists brushing sand off fossils. The Planck satellite, launched in 2009, gave us the sharpest image yet, a baby picture of the cosmos, painted in faint blotches of blue and red. You hover in the void, picturing that map spread across the sky, like wallpaper designed by infinity itself. The thought makes you smile. If the universe had a nursery, this would be the mural on the wall, yet mysteries remain. The radiation is almost too smooth, too consistent. Some physicists puzzle over why opposite sides of the universe look nearly identical, even though they're so far apart they shouldn't have been able to talk to each other in the early days. This is called the horizon problem, and it's one of the reasons theories like cosmic inflation and ultra-fast expansion just after the Big Bang were invented. Historians still argue whether inflation is the right explanation or just a mathematical band-aid. Either way, the microwave glow keeps us guessing, whispering riddles through static. As you float through it, you feel less alone. The void is not a silent abyss anymore. It's a choir humming softly at the edge of hearing, each note an ancient photon brushing past. You're wrapped in the universe's memory, a blanket of radiation older than stars, older than dust, older than black holes. Nothing here is empty, it's saturated with the afterglow of everything. You close your eyes and let that faint warmth settle over you. Suddenly the void doesn't feel indifferent. It feels intimate, like a parent's hand resting gently on your shoulder. You drift deeper into the cosmic glow, soothed by the knowledge that even in the coldest emptiness, the universe has left a nightlight burning. The faint afterglow of the cosmic microwave background still clings to you, like a whisper of warmth across your skin. But as you drift onward, the silence of the void begins to shift again. This time it feels restless, almost impatient, like the blackness is stretching itself out beneath you. You sense a gentle tug, not from a nearby planet or star, but from the fabric of space itself. Galaxies far in the distance drift away, their light red shifting, their outlines dimming. It isn't your imagination, this is dark energy at work, the invisible push that accelerates the expansion of the universe. Emptiness, it turns out, comes with an attitude. The story of dark energy is surprisingly recent. For much of the 20th century, scientists assumed that gravity would eventually slow cosmic expansion. Maybe the universe would keep spreading forever, or maybe it would collapse back into a big crunch. But in 1998, two teams of astronomers studying distant supernovae discovered something shocking. Instead of slowing, the universe was speeding up. It was as if some hidden hand were pressing its palm against the galaxies, shoving them apart faster and faster. You float in awe, realizing that you're not just drifting passively here in the void, you're surfing the invisible tide of a force that nobody fully understands. Historians still argue whether Einstein deserves the last laugh in all this. Back in 1917, he added a cosmological constant to his equations, essentially a fudge factor to keep the universe static, because he thought an expanding cosmos sounded absurd. Later, when Hubble discovered the expansion, Einstein called his constant the greatest blunder of his career. But now, with dark energy, physicists have brought it back as a possible explanation. Was Einstein wrong to regret it? Or was he right before his time? The debate continues as lively as ever. Dark energy is slippery. Unlike matter, it doesn't clump into stars or planets. Unlike light, it doesn't radiate. It simply fills space, a pressure that grows stronger the more room there is. The quirky part is that as the universe expands, dark energy seems to create even more of itself, like an over-enthusiastic baker tossing extra dough into an already rising loaf. The result? Galaxies slide farther apart, and the night sky grows lonelier. Billions of years from now, distant galaxies may vanish entirely from view, carried away so quickly their light can no longer reach us. You take a long breath, feeling suddenly protective of the twinkles still visible. Nothing has teeth, and it's chewing the cosmos apart slowly. Scientists estimate that dark energy makes up about 68% of the universe. Matter, the stuff of stars, planets, and you, only accounts for about 5%. The rest is dark matter, another mystery altogether. That means the visible universe, everything you can point at and name, is just a thin crust floating on a sea of unknown. Knowns? You laugh softly at the absurdity. Humans write poems about starlight, build myths about constellations, and make wishes on comets, yet all of that is a rounding error in the universe's budget. Nothing rules the balance sheet. And here's the kicker. No one knows what dark energy really is. Some call it vacuum energy, the same restless jitter you felt with quantum fluctuations. Others propose it's a new kind of dynamic field, nicknamed quintessence after Aristotle's fifth element. And still others suggest it might be an illusion, a sign that our understanding of gravity itself is flawed. You float in silence, swelling at the thought that the greatest discovery of modern cosmology might be a bookkeeping mistake. Even nothing has paperwork problems. The implications, though, are staggering. If dark energy keeps accelerating expansion, the universe could end not in a crunch, but in a big freeze. Stars would burn out, galaxies would scatter, and space would stretch into an endless thin nothingness. Some theories even predict a big rip, where the expansion grows so violent that galaxies, planets, molecules, and eventually atoms themselves are torn apart. You imagine drifting in that future void, the ultimate silence where even particles can't cling together. A little bleak, sure, but at least you'd never run out of legroom. You think about how different this is from Aristotle's fear of the void or Torricelli's cautious experiments. They worried about small gaps, little absences in glass tubes. Now you're contemplating a cosmic force that might dictate the ultimate fate of everything. The scale is absurd but strangely soothing. Nothing isn't just a gap anymore. It's the engine of destiny. As you lie back in the stretching dark, you notice the galaxies sliding farther away. Their light grows fainter, redder, softer. Yet instead of sadness, you feel a quiet awe. The void is moving, evolving, alive in its own way. Dark energy may be invisible, but it paints the universe's story in the broadest brush strokes possible. You close your eyes, letting the gentle acceleration carry you like a current, and accept that sometimes the most powerful something is hidden inside nothing at all. The galaxies keep sliding outward, their light dimming as the invisible tide of dark energy carries them away. You float with them for a while, watching stars recede, until they blur into a soft haze. But then, like a coin tumbling out of the dark, a new shape drifts into your thoughts. Not a galaxy, not a star, but a number. The number 0. You smile to yourself, of course. Humanity needed a symbol for nothing, long before it could dream of cosmic voids. If you want to understand emptiness, you first have to learn how to write it down. You picture a clay tablet in ancient Mesopotamia, somewhere around 300 BCE. A scribe is etching cuneiform wedges into the soft surface, recording grain counts or tax payments. When he comes to a place where no value belongs, he leaves a gap, or sometimes uses a pair of slanted marks to show nothing here. It's not quite 0, but it's a placeholder, the first hint that absence deserves a symbol. The thought makes you grin. Nothing begins its journey in the world of bookkeeping, not philosophy. Even the void had to pay its taxes. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians truly grasped 0 as a number or just as a spacer. The difference matters. Without 0 as a real concept, you can't do the kind of math that later built astronomy, navigation, or even your smartphone. Yet for centuries, civilizations toyed with the idea without fully embracing it. The Greeks, despite their philosophical brilliance, disliked 0. Aristotle himself argued against it, claiming that nothing cannot exist. Numbers to him described quantities, and how could you count what isn't there? You chuckle softly, leave it to Aristotle to get personally offended by arithmetic. The quirky twist comes in India. Around the 5th century, mathematicians began using a small dot to mark nothing, and eventually transformed it into the round 0 we know today. More importantly, they treated it as a full-fledged number. You could add it, subtract it, even multiply with it. This was revolutionary. The Indian scholar Brahmagupta even wrote rules for zero, describing it as the result of subtracting a number from itself. You imagine him sitting cross-legged with a palm leaf manuscript, casually inventing the foundation of modern mathematics while you struggle with high school algebra centuries later. From India, the idea of zero travelled to the Islamic world, where scholars expanded on it. Al-Khwarizmi, whose name gave us the word algorithm, used zero in his writings on algebra. The concept later slipped into Europe through translations of Arabic texts. At first, Europeans resisted. The number felt suspicious, even dangerous. Some merchants refused to psion it, preferring Roman numerals. City councils in medieval Italy even banned zero, fearing it made fraud too easy. Imagine trying to outlaw nothingness. It's like declaring gravity illegal. You can't stop absence from existing just because it makes your accounting nervous. But slowly, zero won. By the Renaissance, it had taken root in trade, astronomy, and science. It allowed for negative numbers, decimals, and eventually calculus. Without zero, Newton couldn't have written his laws of motion, and computers couldn't function today. You glance at the void around you, amused. Even here, drifting in cosmic nothingness, your understanding of it depends on that little oval-shaped digit. Nothing became the most useful number of all. What's stranger is how unsettling zero remains. Divide by it and math collapses into paradox. Infinity leaps out of nowhere like a rabbit from a magician's hat. Entire branches of philosophy wrestle with whether zero is a real quantity or just a convenient fiction. Historians still argue whether ancient cultures truly understood zero in the way we do, or if they simply treated it as shorthand. Yet here you are, floating in space depending on zero to measure distance, speed, even time. Without it, you couldn't name the nothing surrounding you. You think of modern quirks, like the binary system, just ones and zeros on which every digital device relies. Entire universes of information, videos, music, conversations, all built on the interplay between something and nothing. You smile at the thought the void you're floating in right now is, in a sense, mirrored by the invisible streams of zeros carrying this narration. Nothing has become a building block, a partner in creation. You close your eyes, imagining the number itself floating in the dark, a perfect circle, round and hollow, drifting beside you like a cosmic companion. At first glance, it seems empty, but the more you stare, the more it feels complete, as though the circle contains infinity folded inward. Perhaps that's why zero unsettles people. It looks like absence, but it holds potential. It's not emptiness, but the seed of everything. The void around you shimmers gently, as if agreeing. You realize that numbers are our way of talking to nothing, of giving it shape, and zero, the round whisper, is the translator. You exhale slowly, letting the thoughts settle. Sometimes the best way to measure nothing is to admit it has value. The perfect circle of zero still lingers in your mind, glowing faintly against the dark. But as you drift further into the void, a different kind of nothing begins to rise around you, one that isn't mathematical or physical, but deeply human, woven through centuries of philosophy and spirituality. You inhale softly, and the silence shifts, not toward equations or telescopes, but toward breath itself. In the East, emptiness was never just absence. It was a path, a practice, a way of becoming whole. You imagine yourself in an ancient temple, incense curling into the still air, a monk seated cross-legged in quiet meditation. In Buddhist philosophy, the void is called shunyata, often translated as emptiness, but here, emptiness isn't a terrifying lack. It's the recognition that everything is impermanent, interdependent, without fixed essence. You let that thought wash over you, realizing how different it feels from the Western fear of nothing. Instead of resisting absence, Buddhism invites you to sit with it, to breathe it in. Emptiness becomes clarity, not void, but openness. Historians still argue whether shunyata should be understood literally, as a metaphysical claim about the universe, or more, as a psychological tool for detachment. But either way, it's striking that where Aristotle and medieval scholars saw horror, Buddhist teachers saw liberation. To realize that nothing is permanent, they said, was to dissolve suffering. You chuckle quietly. Imagine Aristotle meditating with his sandals crossed, trying to accept that the void is not a flaw, but a teacher. He probably wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes. The quirky twist is that in Taoism, the idea of emptiness takes yet another flavour. The Tao Te Ching praises the usefulness of nothing. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. You picture yourself floating inside one of those clay pots now, realizing the walls matter less than the hollow they surround. Even your bed, drifting through this cosmic dark, only holds you because of the empty space between its fibers. Nothing is functional. Absence is what allows presence to work. You breathe deeply, and the rhythm feels almost ritualistic. In Zen practice, emptiness is encountered through meditation, where the mind is cleared of clutter until it rests in pure awareness. You close your eyes and try it here in the cosmic dark. At first, your thoughts jitter, supernovae, black holes, cosmic microwaves. Then slowly the chatter softens, leaving only breath and heartbeat. Strangely, it feels easier here in the void, as though the universe itself has already stripped away distractions. For a moment, nothing feels not like a concept, but an experience. On Earth, emptiness in this sense is woven into art and design. Japanese aesthetics call it ma, the negative space that gives form its meaning. A blank stretch of garden sand, a pause between musical notes, a silence in conversation. These are all moments of nothing that shape the whole. You smile, remembering the cosmic silence you felt earlier. Maybe the universe has been practicing Ma all along, spacing galaxies like brushstrokes across an infinite canvas. You can't resist a small joke to yourself. Somewhere out there, an alien philosopher might be lecturing on the intergalactic utility of empty parking spaces. Even cosmic civilizations must admit that sometimes the most valuable thing is room to breathe. Yet the more you lean into these ideas, the more you notice how they change your relationship with the void around you. It doesn't feel hostile anymore. It feels generous, offering space for whatever you need. Thought, stillness, imagination. The Buddhist monks, the Taoist sages, the Zen gardeners, all whisper the same lesson. Nothing isn't a threat. It's an invitation. Still, scholarly debates never end. Historians still argue whether Eastern philosophies truly embraced nothingness, or whether Western translations distorted the nuance. Perhaps emptiness is too crude a word, too bleak. Maybe it should be thought of as openness, potential unboundedness. Whatever the term, you sense the difference in your own bones as you float here. The void doesn't clutch at you anymore. It holds you gently like a palm open to the sky. You glance around the endless dark and realize it's not so different from sitting quietly in a temple garden, listening to wind move through pines. The stars may be absent, the air thin. The sound gone, but the feeling is the same. A spaciousness that lets your own awareness expand like breath moving into lungs you didn't know were there. You lie back, a small smile on your lips, and let the philosophies braid together in your thoughts. Zero gave humans a way to measure nothing. Science built machines to test it. But in the East, nothing was already understood as fullness, as a place where the boundaries of self dissolve. You feel that dissolving now, your body softening into the vastness, until you can't tell where you end and the void begins. And it's not frightening, it's restful. Like slipping into the pause between heartbeats, into the blank line between words. Here, emptiness feels like home. The quiet spaciousness of Eastern philosophy still lingers around you like incense, but as you drift deeper, the void reshapes again. This time it feels clinical, metallic, humming faintly with machinery. You blink, and instead of a temple or a black hole, you're hovering in a laboratory filled with glass chambers, pumps, and blinking monitors. This is where modern scientists try to build nothing on Earth, where engineers spend their lives chasing the purest vacuum possible. It turns out that nothing is so hard to make. Entire laboratories have been devoted to bottling it. The first thing you notice is the hiss of pumps. They pull air from steel chambers, molecule by molecule, until the pressure inside is millions of times lower than outside. A technician checks gauges that look like oversized watches, adjusting valves to coax the vacuum closer to perfection. You lean over one of the chambers, expecting to see darkness inside. Instead, it looks oddly ordinary, just a shiny metal cylinder. That's the irony. Perfect nothing has no glamour. It hides in stainless steel and silence. Historians still argue whether the quest for high vacuum began as a pursuit of pure science or as a tool for industry. In truth, the two have always been tangled. By the 20th century, vacuum technology was powering everything from light bulbs to electron microscopes. Without vacuum tubes, early computers would never have existed. Quirky detail, the very first radios relied on vacuum tubes glowing faintly, humming like little bottled voids. Entire love songs, war broadcasts, and baseball scores were carried on the back of carefully engineered nothing. But scientists didn't stop there. They wanted more than low-pressure air. They wanted a chamber so empty it could mimic outer space. Today, facilities like NASA's Space Power Facility in Ohio boast the largest vacuum chambers in the world. Imagine a building the size of a football field, designed to suck out nearly every particle of air. Inside, engineers test spacecraft and instruments, making sure they can survive the nothingness of orbit. You float in your drifting bed and chuckle softly. Humans, it seems, rehearse even for emptiness. What makes this pursuit fascinating is its impossibility. No matter how hard you pump, some molecules always cling stubbornly to surfaces, sneaking back into the chamber like party crashers. Even the best ultra-high vacuum systems only reach a handful of atoms per cubic centimetre. That sounds empty, but compared to interstellar space, it's still crowded. Out here, between galaxies, you might drift for miles before bumping into a single atom. On Earth, our nothing is embarrassingly cluttered by comparison. You can't help but laugh. Our finest technology creates emptiness that the universe would call messy. Yet this engineered nothing is indispensable. Particle accelerators like CERN rely on vacuums so clean that protons can race for kilometers without colliding with stray air. Gravitational wave detectors, those enormous laser setups listening for ripples in space-time, need ultra-high vacuum tubes to prevent air from distorting the beams. Even making semiconductors, the tiny chips inside your phone requires layers of near nothing. Without laboratory voids, modern life would sputter out like a candle in an open window. The quirky thing is, creating nothing often involves adding a lot of something. Chambers are baked at high heat to drive out water vapour, then cooled, coated, or flooded with inert gases to push impurities away. Technicians wear suits that make them look like astronauts, scrubbing every trace of skin and hair before approaching the machines. You grin at the irony. To build a void, humans must pile on layers of precision, cost and fuss. Nothing is expensive. As you hover, you picture Aristotle shaking his head at this scene. He once insisted voids couldn't exist, and now entire research budgets are spent manufacturing them. Historians still argue whether he would be horrified or impressed. Maybe both. After all, the vacuum chamber is a kind of rebellion against philosophy, a way of proving emptiness by brute force pumps and steel instead of syllogisms. You drift closer to one of the giant chambers and imagine crawling inside. The door seals shut with a clang, the pumps kick in, and slowly, the air thins until your ears ache. Of course, in reality, you'd need a suit or you wouldn't last long. But in this narrative, you're safe. You listen to the hiss fade, replaced by a silence so pure it almost rings. You realise you've become an experiment yourself, a human floating inside a manufactured void, echoing the larger cosmic void outside. Nothing, it seems, comes in layers. Philosophical, cosmic, technological. The longer you sit with it, the more you sense that even these perfect vacuums aren't truly empty. Quantum jitters, background radiation, the occasional stray atom, they remind you that absolute nothing remains out of reach. The laboratory of nothing can only approach the idea, never catch it. And maybe that's the point. Nothing isn't a finish line. It's a horizon we keep chasing, inventing new machines just to get a little closer. You smile softly as you drift back out of the lab, leaving the hum of pumps behind. The void around you feels a little more human now, flavoured by all those engineers and scientists who dedicated their lives to bottling absence. Nothing may be impossible, but it's also practical, useful, and strangely beautiful. You let that realisation sink in as the dark expands again around you, both infinite and homemade. The echo of the laboratory pumps fades, leaving you once again in the great cosmic quiet. Yet this time the void feels charged, like the air before a storm. You stretch out your hand and imagine two polished metal plates drifting nearby. Perfectly parallel, perfectly smooth, held just a hair's breadth apart. They look inert, indifferent, as though they'd float forever in silence. But then you notice it. They're moving, slowly, gently. The plates begin to press toward each other, as if the nothing between them was shoving them closer. You've stumbled into the Casimir effect, so one of the strangest demonstrations that nothing can actually push back. In Nub 48, Dutch physicist Hendrik Casimir predicted this effect while working on problems in quantum theory. He realized that the jittering energy of the vacuum, the same restless dance of virtual particles you encountered earlier, would create pressure. Between two closely spaced plates, only certain wavelengths of fluctuations can fit. Outside the plates, all wavelengths are allowed. The imbalance generates a subtle force, nudging the plates together. You laugh quietly. Nothing here is like an overeager matchmaker insisting two objects can't stay apart. At first, the Casimir effect sounded like a mathematical curiosity, but decades later, experiments confirmed it. Physicists measured the plates creeping toward each other under invisible pressure, a motion so delicate it required ultra-sensitive instruments. Historians still argue whether Casimir himself ever expected his prediction to be tested, or if it was simply a thought experiment meant to provoke. Either way, his name is now forever linked with the unsettling truth that emptiness isn't passive, it meddles. The quirky part? The Casimir effect has potential applications. Engineers are studying how it influences nanotechnology, where tiny moving parts sit just billionths of a meter apart. At that scale, quantum nudges from the void can cause devices to stick, seize, or collapse. Imagine building a microscopic machine and having it sabotaged by nothing itself. You grin at the irony. When you're that small, the biggest bully on the playground is emptiness. You picture the plates again, hovering nearby, their slow drift inward, almost imperceptible. The void between them looks so blank, yet it teems with restless energy. You realize that this is the same lesson you've been learning all along. Nothing always hides something. The Casimir effect is like the void clearing its throat, reminding you not to underestimate it. There's also a more philosophical ripple here. If nothing can generate pressure, can we really call it nothing at all? Some physicists argue the vacuum is a kind of medium, a background field woven through space-time. Others insist it's still nothing, just a probabilistic stage for particles. Historians still argue whether this means Aristotle was partly right, that true void doesn't exist, or whether modern science has simply redefined nothing into something. You chuckle softly. Leave it to humans to complicate even the simplest absence. You let the plates fade back into the dark, but the feeling lingers. The void doesn't feel passive anymore. It feels interactive, like a partner in conversation. Earlier, you drifted through silence, imagining nothing as blank canvas. Now you see it as a restless participant, capable of nudging, pushing, shaping. Even the most carefully built laboratory vacuums can't escape this invisible pressure. Nothing has opinions, and it's not shy about expressing them. The humour of it strikes you. Somewhere out there, an engineer is tearing their hair out because their nano device jammed. Sabotaged not by dust or dirt, but by the emptiest space possible. You imagine them shaking a fist at the void itself, cursing at nothing. And in its own way, nothing smirks back, whispering, "You thought I was harmless?" You lean into the silence again, but it feels richer now, thicker. The Casimir squeeze has changed your perception of the dark. It's no longer just a stage or a backdrop. It's a force in its own right, a participant in the grand cosmic play. You close your eyes and imagine lying between those plates yourself, being nudged softly by invisible hands. It's not a threatening feeling. If anything, it's reassuring, like the void tucking you in. As your body relaxes, you think back over the journey. Aristotle's denial, Torricelli's tubes, Boyle's pumps, the quantum fizz, the microwave afterglow, the accelerating dark energy, and each layer of nothing revealed a new secret. And now the Casimir effect whispers that absence is never neutral. Even at its quietest, it leans, it nudges, it breathes. You take one last slow breath, letting the thought cradle you. The plates drift closer, and you imagine them meeting at last, no longer separated. The nothing between them vanishes, absorbed into their union. You smile at the symbolism. Perhaps emptiness exists only to bring things together. Perhaps that's its quiet gift. The phantom pressure of the Casimir plates fades as you drift onward, but the idea clings. Nothing isn't just a stage, it's an engine, a restless, bubbling source. You stretch your arms into the dark and imagine your fingertips brushing tiny sparks, like soap bubbles rising and popping in invisible waves. For a moment, you think you see them, small flashes of being swelling out of nowhere, only to vanish before your eyes can catch them. This is the realm of virtual particles, born from the imagination of quantum theory, yet stubbornly leaving fingerprints on reality. At first glance, Virtual particles sound like science fiction. They aren't permanent, can't be bottled, and never leave behind a trace you can scoop up. But quantum mechanics insists they exist in fleeting bursts, arising from fluctuations in energy and dissolving almost immediately. They are called virtual because they don't obey the usual rules of physics. They're more like stagehands rushing across the set, rearranging props before the actors return. And yet, without them, the play of the universe would collapse. One of the most famous examples is how these virtual bubbles affect the electric charge of particles. An electron isn't just a neat little bead of negative charge, it's surrounded by a halo of virtual particles, constantly appearing and vanishing, shielding and altering its behaviour. Without that buzzing entourage, chemistry as you know it wouldn't work. You grin softly at the image, even electrons travel with an invisible fan club. Historians still argue whether these particles are real in any traditional sense. Some physicists insist they're just mathematical conveniences, placeholders in equations that don't literally pop into being. Others argue they're as real as anything else, just fleeting and untouchable. The debate has raged for decades, and yet experiments like the Casimir effect keep suggesting that something genuinely stirs in the void. Nothing keeps leaving clues, even while pretending to be absent. The quirky part is that virtual particles show up in some of the strangest theories about the cosmos. Remember Hawking radiation from black holes? That's powered by these flickering pairs, one particle slipping inside, the other escaping. In other words, the slow death of black holes depends on phantoms that shouldn't even exist. Even more bizarrely, some physicists have speculated that the entire universe might have sprouted from a fluctuation in a primordial void. One cosmic bubble that didn't vanish, but expanded into everything you see today. You laugh quietly at the thought. Imagine the universe as the one soap bubble that refused to pop. You let your eyes wander into the darkness again, half expecting more flashes, but the void remains still, at least to your human senses. You realise how dependent you are on imagination here. The mathematics whispers about virtual bubbles, the experiments hint at their fingerprints, but your body never feels them directly. It's like hearing rumours about ghosts in a house. You never see one, but the creak of the stairs convinces you something's there. You chuckle at the comparison, then picture a physicist in a lab coat hosting a séance. Spirits of the vacuum, reveal yourselves! In a way, that's what particle accelerators are, massive billion-dollar ghost hunts, smashing particles together to glimpse fleeting echoes of what usually hides in the void. And the void, being mischievous, always gives just enough evidence to keep us searching. What's unnerving is how ordinary the consequences are. Virtual particles help explain why atoms don't collapse, why forces behave the way they do, why reality holds its shape at all. The entire universe depends on bubbles of nothing that blink faster than thought. You take a slow breath, letting that fact sink in. You are, in a very real sense, sitting on a chair carved from ghosts, built by absences that never quite become presences. Yet instead of fear, you feel wonder. The void doesn't just sit there, it dreams. It doodles little captures of particles, testing them out before erasing the page. Most of those sketches vanish instantly, but once in a while the doodle lingers, and you get galaxies, stars, and humans staring back into the dark. Nothing, it seems, is the greatest improviser of all. Historians still argue whether humans will ever detect these bubbles directly, or whether they'll remain mathematical rumours forever. But here in the dark, you don't mind the uncertainty. You can almost see the flickers around you like fireflies in the summer air, weaving in and out of being. It's beautiful and it's playful, and it makes the void feel alive. You lie back, smiling faintly, and let the vision fade. Nothing doesn't need to be permanent to matter. Sometimes the briefest sparks are enough to light up an infinite night. The flickering fireflies of virtual particles fade into the dark, but the question they leave behind keeps echoing. If the void can produce these tiny sparks, could it one day produce everything? You drift slowly through the silence, your mind circling around one of the most audacious ideas in modern cosmology, that the entire universe, galaxies and black holes and you tucked beneath your blanket, might have burst forth from nothing itself. No stage, no pre-existing space, not even time, just absence rolling over and deciding to become something. The idea isn't as outlandish as it sounds. In fact, the Big Bang Theory itself already hints at it. When scientists rewind the clock of cosmic expansion, everything collapses back to a singularity, a point of infinite density. But that singularity begs the question, what came before? Did something spark it, or did it simply appear? Some physicists, like Lawrence Krauss, argue that the laws of quantum mechanics allow universes to bubble spontaneously out of nothing, much like virtual particles do in the vacuum. To them, nothing is unstable. Left alone, it inevitably produces something. You smile softly at the thought. Even nothing, it seems, gets bored. Historians still argue whether this explanation really solves the puzzle or simply redefines nothing into something. After all, a quantum vacuum is not pure absence. It's governed by physical laws, equations, and fields. So when scientists say the universe came from nothing, critics point out that it's not really the kind of nothing you picture when you stare into the night skies. It's more like a workshop with invisible tools already lying around. The debate gets heated, with philosophers and physicists swapping essays and eye rolls. You chuckle at the image, Aristotle and Stephen Hawking at the same dinner table, arguing over dessert. But the quirky detail is how often this question slips into myth as well as science. Creation stories from cultures around the world echo with the idea of something arising from void. In Norse mythology, the universe begins in Ginnunga Gap, a yawning nothingness where fire and ice meet. In Egyptian lore, the primeval waters of Nun cradle the first mound of land. Even in the Bible, the world begins when God speaks into darkness, summoning light from formless emptiness. Across time, humans have instinctively pictured creation not as the rearrangement of stuff, but as a leap from absence to presence. The scientific debates feel oddly familiar, just new verses of an ancient song. You close your eyes and imagine it, the void as it might have been before the first spark. No space, no stars, no time ticking, just a silent blank. Then, without warning, a ripple, a bubble expanding faster than light, stretching into the dimension, sewing fabric where there was no fabric before. Within seconds, energy floods the new space. Within minutes, particles condense. Within billions of years, you are here, lying in bed, drifting in your imagination, marveling at how nothing turned into everything. You exhale slowly, humbled. Some theories go even further, suggesting ours may not be the only universe to rise from nothing. Quantum cosmology paints a frothy sea of possible universes, each bubbling into being, most vanishing quickly. A few, like ours, surviving to evolve stars and life. It's the ultimate cosmic lottery, and nothing is the dealer. You can't help but grin. Imagine complaining about bad luck when your very existence is already the unlikeliest win of all. The skeptics push back, of course. Historians still argue whether the phrase universe from nothing is misleading, a poetic sleight of hand that dodges the deeper question. Why are there laws of physics at all? If equations allow something to pop into being, where did those equations come from? Maybe nothing isn't the end of the road, but a curtain hiding an even stranger stage behind it. The void, it seems, is very good at moving the goalposts. You stretch your arms into the darkness, half expecting to brush against one of these newborn bubbles. What would it feel like to touch the skin of a baby universe? Would it be warm, like the afterglow of the Big Bang, or sharp, like a soap bubble pricking your fingers? The thought makes you smile, silly, impossible, but beautiful. Even contemplating it makes the void feel more alive. As the thought fades, you realize something important. Whether the universe truly came from nothing or not, the act of wondering about it reshapes you. Nothing forces you to ask why there is something at all, why you are here, why reality is more than blankness. That question has fueled philosophy, science, and myth for millennia, and it will likely never fully fade. The void always leaves us chasing its secret, dangling the possibility that we sprang from its turbulence. You exhale once more, letting the vastness cradle you. The black around you no longer feels indifferent. It feels mischievous, almost playful, as though it's hiding the punchline of a cosmic joke. Maybe someday science will decode it. Maybe not. But tonight, you're content to drift in the mystery, rocked gently by the thought that everything might be the child of nothing. The idea of a universe bubbling out of nothing lingers like a spark in your chest. But as you drift further into the void, you notice another flavour of absence rising around you. Not scientific this time, but cultural, artistic. Humans, it seems, have always been drawn to the challenge of portraying nothing. of folding impotence and emptiness into art. You settle deeper into your drifting bed, and suddenly the darkness feels less like a cosmic laboratory and more like a gallery. Empty canvases hang in the black, silent piano's waiting corners, and you realise you've wandered into the strange museum of nothing. The most famous exhibit here is John Cage's 152 composition, Fort and 33. You picture a pianist walking onto the stage, sitting at the instrument, and then nothing. No notes, no chords, just 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence. At first, the audience fidgets, coughs, rustles their programs. Then they realise the music isn't absent. It's the sound of the room itself, the creak of chairs, the shifting of feet, the hum of air conditioning. Cage wanted to prove that silence was never truly empty, that nothingness itself had a voice. You chuckle softly. Imagine paying for concert tickets and getting serenaded by your neighbour's sniffles. Quirky, yes, but also profound. Historians still argue whether Cage's piece was genius or gimmick. Was it a radical redefinition of music or just a clever stunt? The debate has lasted decades, but you realise that's the point. The silence provokes thought, forcing people to confront absence as presence. It's like the Casimir effect of the art world. Nothing, pushing. From there, your gallery expands. Minimalist painters like Kazimir Malevich once shocked audiences with canvases that were nothing but black squares. Critics scoffed, but Malevich argued that the void was itself the subject, that the square was pure feeling stripped of distraction. Later, artists like Yves Klein displayed empty galleries as exhibitions, claiming the void itself was art. You imagine walking into one of those blank rooms, expecting paintings, and finding only silence and white walls. Would you feel cheated, or would you feel strangely seen? The quirky tidbit is that Klein even sold pieces of the void. He offered buyers receipts for immaterial zones of pictorial sensibility. If they paid in gold and then ceremonially burned the receipt, he would toss half the gold into the Seine. People actually did this, willingly trading treasure for a taste of nothing. You grin at the thought, humans will pay a fortune for absence, as long as it comes with a good story. You drift further through the gallery, and music swells again, not notes, but spaces. Composers like Arvo Pärt and Morton Feldman wrote pieces that breathe with silence, letting rests stretch like cosmic pauses. In Japanese No theatre, the silence between drum beats is as important as the sound itself. Even in rock and pop, dramatic pauses often carry more weight than noise. You let your ears rest in the cosmic quiet and realise the most powerful part of a song might be the nothing between notes. Historians still argue whether art about nothing reflects deep philosophy or just modern rebellion. Some critics say minimalist art is lazy, hiding behind emptiness to avoid effort. Others argue it's the bravest choice, removing everything familiar so the viewer must confront themselves. Either way, you notice how alive the void feels when framed as art. The gallery you're floating through vibrates with intention, as though every blank wall is waiting for you to fill it. And then there's literature. Writers from Samuel Beckett to modern poets have used silence and blank pages as part of their storytelling. A pause, an ellipsis, a white expanse in a book. It all points to nothing as narrative. Even in cinema, directors use your long, quiet shots to make you squirm in your seat, forcing you to feel absence rather than filling every moment with action. You chuckle, imagining a movie trailer. Coming soon, absolutely nothing. Strangely, you'd probably watch it. The void around you feels different now. Not hostile, not scientific, but theatrical. It's a stage, a canvas, a page. You realise that humans keep reinventing nothing because it helps them explore themselves. In the pause of Cage's piano, in the blankness of Malevich's square, in the empty gallery of Klein, you see the same message. Absence is a mirror. It reflects you back at yourself. You lie back in your drifting bed, letting the cosmic gallery dissolve. The darkness you're floating in feels painted now, framed, even composed. You begin to understand why artists chased it, why they displayed it, why audiences gasped or scoffed. Nothing isn't boring, it's provocative. It demands your attention more fiercely than clutter ever could. You exhale slowly, smiling at the irony. To explore nothing, humans made something, art, music, theatre, all designed to remind us that the spaces in between matter. The void hums with creativity, and tonight you're its audience. The gallery of nothing dissolves into black again, and you feel yourself carried deeper into a quieter, more intimate space. The The cosmic emptiness outside suddenly mirrors something closer to home, the emptiness inside you. Human beings, after all, are as haunted by psychological voids as they are by cosmic ones. You drift in your bed raft, thinking about how people talk about feeling empty, as if loneliness or grief could carve holes inside the chest. The void, it seems, is not just out there among galaxies, it's in the spaces of the human heart. You remember how often emptiness shows up in literature, not just as cosmic wonder, but as personal ache. Writers describe depression as a hollow, a cavern without light. People talk about heartbreak leaving them numb or vacant, as though emotions can leak out and leave only air. Historians still argue whether the metaphor of emptiness in psychology comes from cultural inheritance, echoes of Aristotle, theology, and Eastern thought, or whether it's simply the most natural image the brain can find. After all, when you feel drained, what else fits but nothing? But emptiness isn't always tragic. Sometimes it's the opposite. Artists, thinkers, and meditators often speak of needing empty time, moments when the brain can rest and wander. Neuroscience even shows that creativity spikes when the mind is quiet, when the so-called default mode network hums during boredom or daydreams. You smile at the irony. The best ideas often emerge not from busyness, but from blankness. Nothing in this sense is not absence, but fertile ground. A quirky tidbit, Salvador Dali used to practice slumber with a key. He'd sit in a chair holding a heavy key in his hand. As soon as he drifted into sleep, the key would fall, clattering to wake him. In those fleeting empty seconds between wakefulness and dream, he claimed to find some of his strangest and most brilliant images. Emptiness, weaponized for creativity. You imagine Dali drifting here in the cosmic void with you, melting clocks, dripping off the stars that aren't there. The void around you feels suddenly more personal. It's no longer just black space. It's a metaphor for that hollow feeling everyone knows, the Sunday afternoon melancholy, the long pause after loss, the eerie quiet when you realize you've turned your phone off and the world has stopped buzzing. And yet, even in those moments, emptiness shapes you. It gives meaning to what comes after. The joy of reunion is sweeter because you first felt absence. The spark of inspiration is brighter because it arose in blankness. Historians still argue whether emptiness in psychology should be treated as pathology or potential. Some schools of thought see it as a warning sign, an absence of meaning that needs to be filled. Others suggest it's a normal, even necessary part of human life, a pause between the notes of experience. The debates echo across time like faint whispers, but here in the void you see both sides clearly. Nothing inside can hurt, yes, but it can also heal. You let your body relax, thinking of all the ways humans chase or flee emptiness. Some fill it with noise, scrolling endlessly through feeds, binging shows, stuffing silence with chatter. Others seek it, meditating, hiking alone, staring at ceilings until thoughts dissolve. Both are understandable. Nothing is a mirror, and not everyone is comfortable with what they see. You can't help but laugh at yourself. Here you are, floating through the literal cosmic void while also admitting you felt the metaphorical one, the loneliness of late nights, the hollowness of disappointment, the quiet satisfaction of doing absolutely nothing on a lazy afternoon. It's all the same, scaled differently. The universe has its emptiness, and so do you. The quirky part is how often people treat their own emptiness like a secret shame, when in reality it's universal. Every culture has words for it. Ennui, melancholy, desolation, quietude. It's as old as poetry and as current as therapy hashtags. If nothing else, nothing unites us. The void around you feels gentler now, as if it's whispering, don't fight the hollowness. Accept it, rest in it, let it be the pause before the next note. You close your eyes and let that thought settle. Emptiness isn't just a cosmic condition, it's part of being human. And maybe, just maybe, that means you don't have to fear it. You breathe in, slow and steady, and for a moment you feel both the vastness outside and the hollowness inside balancing each other. Two voids, one cosmic, one personal, humming softly in resonance. Nothing has never felt so full. The echo of inner emptiness still lingers in your chest as you drift onward. But now the cosmic void stretches into a new shape. You're no longer hovering near black holes or bathing in microwave afterglow. You're gliding into the wilderness between stars, the interstellar desert. At first, it looks like pure nothing, a vast gulf of black with no constellations nearby. But the longer you drift, the more you realize how deceptive that emptiness is. Out here, the spaces between suns are not truly void, they are just incredibly sparse. 1 atom per cubic meter counts as crowded in this territory. You let out a soft laugh. Imagine calling a single lonely atom traffic. Yet in the interstellar desert, that's a bustling city. Scientists call this domain the interstellar medium, and it's made mostly of hydrogen, with sprinkles of helium and heavier elements. Clouds of gas drift slowly, sometimes thick enough to block starlight, sometimes so thin they're practically invisible. You try to picture yourself drifting through one of those wispy clouds, molecules brushing past you like ghosts at a masquerade. They move so slowly and are so far apart that you could float for years without colliding with anything significant. The void here isn't absence, it's diluteness. Historians still argue whether early astronomers understood these starless gulfs at all. For centuries they thought dark patches in the Milky Way were holes, literal gaps in the stars. Only later did scientists realize those shadows were dense clouds of dust blocking light, not empty voids. You imagine Galileo peering through his telescope, frowning at the black spaces as if the stars had simply failed to show up for work. The quirky tidbit is that even in these deserts, you're never truly alone. Cosmic rays, high-energy particles born from supernovae, zip through the emptiness at nearly the speed of light. They're invisible bullets whistling past, carrying information from distant cataclysms. If you close your eyes, you can almost feel them streaking by like phantom raindrops in an otherwise dry storm. Astronauts have even reported seeing flashes of light behind their eyelids in space, thought to be caused by cosmic rays hitting their retinas. Nothing, it turns out, occasionally throws sparks. You let your thoughts wander to the scale of it all. The distance between stars is measured in light years, trillions of miles of near vacuum. The nearest star system to Earth, Alpha Centauri, is over 4 light years away. If you were to drive there in a car at highway speed, you'd arrive in about 50 million years, assuming you didn't need bathroom breaks. You smile at the absurdity. Interstellar road trips are not for the impatient. And yet these gulfs are not wasted space. They are the wombs of stars. Within the interstellar medium, clouds of gas can collapse under gravity, igniting nuclear fire and giving birth to new suns. So the very emptiness that feels desolate is also fertile, brimming with potential. You imagine drifting through one of these nurseries, watching pinpricks of light flare into existence, each one a future star system. A future sky for some distant civilization. The desert hides seeds. Historians still argue whether humans should think of the interstellar medium as space in the everyday sense, or as a diffuse substance that connects everything. Poets like to call it the ocean between islands of light, while physicists describe it in equations of pressure and density. Both are true. Floating here, you feel both the dryness of the desert and the swell of a tide that someday will crash into new stars. The quirky part is how thin this medium really is compared to earthly air. Right now, you're probably inhaling about 10 sextillion molecules in every breath. Out here, entire rooms could stretch empty except for a handful of atoms, yet if you gathered all the gas in the interstellar medium, it would outweigh every star combined. The nothing between stars is paradoxically massive, a reservoir hidden in plain sight. You smile at the contradiction. Even emptiness likes to exaggerate. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the desert. It's silent, but not sterile. There's a hush here, like standing in a snowy field at night, where every sound feels muffled. You think back to earlier, Cage's silent music, Zen's empty breath. The laboratory vacuums, and realize this interstellar quiet is another verse of the same song. Nothing always has texture, whether metallic, jittering, or softly expansive. You stretch out your arm, imagining your fingertips brushing a solitary hydrogen atom. It's absurd, of course, you'd have to search millions of cubic meters to find one. But the thought comforts you. Even the loneliest atom belongs here. A faint heartbeat in the desert of stars. You let that realization sink in as you drift farther, the void around you vast but never entirely empty. The interstellar desert stretches behind you as you drift onward. And the void begins to change once again. This time it doesn't feel restless or fertile. It feels final. The silence grows heavier, colder, more absolute, as though it's foreshadowing the fate of everything. You've wandered into the far future of the cosmos, into a vision of what nothing might become when the last star burns out. This is the great debate about the end of time. Will the universe collapse back in, or will it stretch into emptiness so total that even atoms unravel? For most of the 20th century, scientists thought gravity might eventually halt cosmic expansion. If the universe contained enough mass, galaxies would slow, then drift back inward, ending in a big crunch. But with the discovery of dark energy, that vision shifted. Instead of collapsing, the universe seems destined to accelerate forever. Stars will burn their fuel, galaxies will drift beyond sight, and the cosmos will slide into what's called heat death. You float in that imagined future now, surrounded not by glittering galaxies but by silence so wide it aches. Historians still argue whether heat death is the inevitable fate or just one possibility. Some models suggest dark energy could change character, slowing expansion or reversing it. Others predict the expansion will grow violent, leading to the Big Rip, where even atoms are torn apart by the accelerating fabric of space. You imagine drifting in that future void as the very molecules of your bed raft are stretched into nothingness. Not exactly cozy bedtime material, but at least you wouldn't have to fold the sheets anymore. The quirky twist is how long all of this would take. Stars like our sun will shine for billions more years. Red dwarfs, the most common stars, could burn for trillions. Even after the last fusion flames die, black dwarfs, cold remnants of dead stars, might linger for Google years, a number so large it makes your brain ache. You chuckle softly. Humans panic over expiration dates on milk cartons, while the cosmos measures nothing in timescales that make centuries look like coffee breaks. And yet even heat death isn't truly nothing. In that half-lung future, black holes will still dot the dark, slowly evaporating through Hawking radiation. For unimaginable stretches of time, they'll hiss their way into disappearance one by one. Eventually, the cosmos could flatten into a thin soup of particles, temperature equal everywhere, no gradients left to fuel motion or life. A static silence, a universal shrug. This is entropy's victory, not fire and brimstone, but exhaustion. Nothing is the final state of everything. But some physicists whisper about even stranger endings. Perhaps vacuum fluctuations, the same jittery bubbles you brushed against earlier, could trigger a false vacuum decay. If our universe sits in a metastable state, one quantum twitch could spark a bubble of lower energy nothing that expands at the speed of light, rewriting the laws of physics as it consumes everything. You wouldn't even see it coming. One moment you're sipping coffee, the next, poof, new void, new rules, new universe. You laugh nervously, nothing can be a drama queen. Historians still argue whether contemplating these distant fates is meaningful or just intellectual theatre. After all, no one will be around to witness the last star's death or the great unravelling. But you realise it matters because it reframes your present. To know that everything tends toward emptiness makes the something around you more precious. Each breath, each star, each flicker of life burns brighter against the backdrop of eventual silence. The void around you feels almost ceremonial now, as though you're standing at the edge of a great stage after the curtain has fallen. The props are gone, the audience has left, but the theatre still hums faintly with memory. You sit with that feeling for a moment, letting it soften rather than frighten you. If nothing is the universe's final act, then perhaps it's less of an ending and more of a return. Silence folding over sound, dark folding over light, rest following play. The quirky comfort is that nothing has always been here. It framed the birth of stars, lingered between galaxies, shaped music and art, mirrored human psychology. If it claims the future as well, then the story comes full circle. Nothing isn't defeat, it's continuity. You exhale, smiling faintly. The universe may someday end in silence, but right now you're still drifting, still listening, still warmed by the presence of being. And that's enough. The vision of the universe's far-off fate lingers behind you like a fading dream, but the void around you begins to soften again. The silence loses its edge, stretching into something gentler, almost tender. You've wandered through so many flavours of nothing, philosophical denials, quantum jitters, cosmic whispers, artistic silences, personal hollows, and now you've arrived at a place where they all blur together. The black canvas feels less like an abyss and more like a blanket. You settle into it, realising that maybe the truest answer to what is nothing isn't a formula or a debate, but a lullaby. You think back over your journey, each stop like a stepping stone across the dark. You drifted through Aristotle's outrage at the idea of a vacuum, chuckled at Torricelli's mercury tubes, winced at Boyle's birds in glass chambers, and marvelled at Gericka's horses failing to pry apart hemispheres held together by emptiness. You felt quantum foam fizzing under your fingertips, smelled the metallic tang of space clinging to astronaut suits, listened to the impossible silence where sound refuses to travel. You watched black holes roar with invisible appetite, then glowed in the microwave warmth of the universe's baby picture. You surfed on the invisible push of dark energy, toyed with zero like a perfect little circle, and breathed Eastern philosophies where emptiness was not loss but fullness. You saw engineers bottle nothing in steel chambers, felt that the Casimir squeeze pressed two mirrors together, and imagined soap bubble universes sprouting from virtual sparks. You walked the galleries of blank art, traced the human ache of psychological voids, wandered the deserts between stars, and finally gazed at the possible futures where everything ends in silence. And now, here you are, back in the simplest truth: the void is never empty. It always hums. Historians still argue, of course. They'll keep bickering about whether nothing is truly possible, whether the vacuum is real or imagined, whether the universe had a beginning or simply is. Scientists will keep building bigger machines, pumping harder vacuums, scribbling stranger equations. Artists will keep painting black squares and writing silent music. Humans will keep feeling emptiness in their bones and filling it with stories. The debate never ends. And maybe that's the gift. Nothing is inexhaustible because it always mirrors our questions back at us. The quirky realization is that nothing is also the most democratic concept in existence. Every person who ever lived has known it, whether staring at a starless night sky, listening to a long pause in conversation, or lying awake at 3 a.m. with a hollow ache in their chest. Nothing belongs equally to philosophers, scientists, monks, and children. It's the one idea that requires no telescope, no degree, no temple. You just close your eyes, breathe, and there it is. The void around you feels warmer now, like it's tucking you in. You let your breath slow, your body sinking into the softness of the black, the hum of your fan, the faint pulse in your ears, the rhythm of your own lungs. All of it blends with the silence until the boundary between sound and nothing blurs. You realize that nothing isn't an answer but a rhythm, the pause between beats that makes the song whole. You smile faintly in the dark. Maybe the universe will end in emptiness. Maybe it began there too. Maybe you'll never know. But tonight, you've drifted far enough to accept that the question itself is the comfort. Nothing is the space that lets you rest, the pause that lets you breathe, the silence that lets you dream. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you surrender to it. Not as loss, not as fear, but as the gentlest gift the cosmos has to offer. The void is quiet now, softer than before, as though it has dimmed the lights for you. The edges of your thoughts blur, stretching longer, smoother, like shadows at dusk. Every detail you've wandered through, the philosophers, the physicists, the whispers of radiation, the empty galleries, fades into a gentle haze. What remains is only the sensation of spaciousness, an openness that holds you without pressing, without demanding. Your breath slows to match the rhythm of the silence. In, out, in, out. Each inhale draws in calm, each exhale releases the weight of questions. The void is no longer a puzzle to solve, but a blanket to settle under. You feel yourself floating, buoyed by nothing, yet supported completely. The stars you imagined earlier have all gone out now, leaving only darkness. But it isn't frightening. It's soothing, like the soft close of a door or the last flicker of a candle. The emptiness is kind. It asks nothing of you except to rest. You let your mind quiet further, thoughts loosening their grip, drifting like dust motes into the dark. Even the word nothing begins to dissolve, replaced by the deeper stillness it points to. There is no need for answers here, only breath, only rest. And as you sink deeper, the silence cradles you, whispering in a language older than stars. Sleep now and let the void hold you. Tomorrow there will be light and noise again, but tonight you are safe in the gentlest nothing of all.